This is Civics, Chapter 7, Section 3, the Supreme Court. So just a review of the Supreme Court. I know we've covered a lot of this in previous chapters, but the Supreme Court has 9 judges. They're called justices. The head of the Supreme Court is the Chief Justice, and they are also chosen by the President when the opening is available. Like last one that was available, Chief Justice Rehnquist, he stepped down in, I believe, 2005, and then President Bush was able to nominate a new Chief Justice, which became John Roberts. And then all justices are selected by the President and then approved by the Senate. There are no age restrictions or citizenship rules for being eligible to be a Supreme Court justice according to the Constitution, unlike the President, who needs to be 35 and a natural-born citizen, and a senator needs to be 30 and needs to be at least a naturalized citizen. There are no specifics on the qualifications for a Supreme Court justice. Technically, they don't even need to have a law degree. But almost all of them do, who are selected, and almost all of them have experience working in the federal level, federal court system, either at the district level or the appeals level. So presidents are not guaranteed the opportunity to appoint a Supreme Court justice. It just kind of happens when they get to appoint someone. So when they take up the office of presidency, they make their cabinet, they decide who their advisors can be, but they can't name a Supreme Court justice until a position is available. Things can happen like with President Jimmy Carter in his 4 years of president. He didn't get to nominate anybody. But President Trump, during his 4 years as president, he was able to nominate 3. There was 3 openings. He was able to fill them. Republican presidents will choose a conservative justice that more has conservative views, reflecting the Republican Party, and Democratic presidents will choose a more liberal-leaning justice. The Supreme Court justices are not regularly chosen. This is why it keeps that balance between conservative and liberal judges. There's usually a balance like 5 to 4 to conservative to liberal, or liberal to conservative. Keeps that balance because presidents tend to change throughout the years from Republican. They switch on and off Republican to Democrat, and that keeps the Supreme Court balanced in that regard. It's not, and for the fact that not all the Supreme Court justices are nominated by the same president. Since they're nominated by different presidents that switch from Republican to Democrat, that keeps the Supreme Court pretty balanced. The Judiciary Act of 1869 officially set the Supreme Court to 9. So that's when it was like, okay, we're only going to have 9, because we originally started with 5, and then it kind of grew to 7, and then it stopped at 9 in 1869. And then presidents who take office with a Supreme Court that has a majority Supreme Court justices with an opposite viewpoint will try to pack the court. So that means is if you have a Democratic president with a majority a conservative Supreme Court that were nominated by Republican presidents, then some presidents have tried to pack the court with more like-minded Supreme Court justices. That's called court packing. It's the president's attempt to add more Supreme Court justices that will rule similarly with the president's agenda. An example of that was President Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, tried to get legislation passed to add more Supreme Court justices. In kind of a slick way, he said every time that a Supreme Court justice hits 70 years old, the president should be able to add a Supreme Court justice. I don't know about that, because a lot of them are pretty old. So But he did this. The real reason why he did this was he didn't want he didn't want any resistance from the Supreme Court against his New Deal programs that would lift the United States out of the Great Depression. Currently, there is speculation that President Joe Biden will try to add Supreme Court justices because right now there are 6 conservative Republican Supreme Court justices to only 3 Democratic nominated Supreme Court justices. So there is a bit of an imbalance right now. And Joe Biden being the liberal president, he would want more liberal policies. But no president has been successful at adding or court packing or adding justices. There's some notable Supreme Court justices. John Marshall, he pretty much set the precedent of what a Chief Justice should be and how the Supreme Court should act and operate. He was the Chief Justice for 34 years, pretty much at the beginning of the nation, and had a major impact on the judicial branch. Thurgood Marshall, he was the first African American on the Supreme Court. He was formerly a lawyer for these major civil rights cases that made it to the Supreme Court, such as Brown versus Board of Education, which ended segregation laws and ended segregation in schools. Sandra Day O'Connor, that's her right there. She was the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court in 1981 by Ronald Reagan. She played a pivotal role in women's rights and landmark court cases. Just a big supporter of women's rights. And then you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who most recently passed away. And she was last to leave her position at her death in September. And then she was replaced by Amy Coney Barrett, who is the newest Supreme Court justice to be appointed. There are over 8,000 cases that are submitted to the Supreme Court every year to be reviewed. Most are denied. That's just an extraordinary amount of cases, and the Supreme Court just doesn't have that much time every year to go through all of them. So the most are denied for these reasons. More than 4 of the justices agree with the decision of the lower courts, meaning that they look at the case real quick and they review it and they say, well, the lower courts were right, and they do not agree to further entertain the appeal, or the case involves no significant point of law or impact to the United States. The Supreme Court only hears about 100 cases a year, which is pretty amazing. That's a lot of cases all on its own, because it's not like cases can be done and decided just on a daily basis. So hearing a case, review 4 of the 9 Supreme Court justices must agree to hear a case before the Supreme Court puts the case on its calendar. So pretty much the Supreme Court has this big calendar of when all these cases will be heard. Lawyers on both sides, if selected, are asked to submit briefs. These are written arguments supporting their side of the case. The justices will review the briefs before the hearing begins. Once the hearing begins, lawyers from both sides present their arguments before the Supreme Court. These lawyers, they only have a half an hour to present their arguments. And then afterwards, after they present their argument, the Supreme Court asks all these very detailed and challenging questions about the case itself. Lawyers better be ready for all these intense questions. The only justice that doesn't speak during this time is Justice Clarence Thomas, who prefers to remain silent the entirety of the hearing. That's just kind of his thing. He says he learns more and can judge better from just listening. Kind of a unique individual. So when making a decision, justices believe that they must apply the laws of the Constitution. Justices look at all the related precedents that have been established by the courts before in past cases regarding constitutional questioning of the same nature. This is to keep a consistent body of law in the United States. So they want to keep the court rulings throughout the district, the Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court. They want to keep the rulings pretty much the same, unless they need to change it for some reason. And really, precedent, that's just an early decision from another case. They really look at what has been said before about certain cases. Like a Supreme Court case about the freedom of speech, well, they would look at previous cases about freedom of press case. In this case, freedom of press. They would look at previous freedom of the press cases. As American changes, so do its laws, and the Supreme Court may go against previous precedents. And that's kind of their decision, and that's kind of their judicial review to amend, to look at laws in the United States and decide whether they're constitutional or not. So making this decision, the Supreme Court meets privately and they discuss it, and then they vote on it. There is no media coverage allowed, or anybody really allowed, when they discuss or when they vote. The Chief Justice's job is to lead discussion for each case. And after every justice has given their kind of thought and opinion, they vote on it. And just a simple majority needs to rule to decide the case, 5 out of the 9. That's why it's always good to have an odd number. If there was an even number, you could have a tie. When the voting comes down to just one vote and it's 4-4, that vote is called a swing vote, and the justice, whoever hasn't voted yet, is the swing vote. The Supreme Court issues a majority opinion that is the explanation of the reason why they decided or ruled on the case one way or the other. A concurrent decision is written by a judge that agreed with the majority but did not agree with the opinion or the reasoning for the ruling. And the minority opinion is for those Supreme Court justices that did not agree with the majority and lost their argument for the ruling. But those minority opinions are important because they set maybe an example for a future majority opinion on a new case of similar subject matter. So cases tend to pop up of the same, every it could be years afterwards, but they take a look at those minority opinions and see what kind of arguments they made that weren't, to maybe help them out on their current cases. Supreme Court's periods of time that they have different personalities throughout history. In the 50s, under the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Earl Warren, he led a Supreme Court that protected many personal constitutional rights for Americans, such as the landmark case of Miranda versus Arizona, where all arrested citizens must be read their rights when arrested. We'll be discussing this case further, but and we discussed it already with the Bill of Rights, in that the police have to, because of this case, the police have to actually tell you your rights in the Constitution when you are arrested. So it's just protecting, the Warren Court, as it was called, promoted this judicial activism. And that's pretty much an effort to take an active role in policymaking and overturning laws that they felt were unconstitutional. So during the Warren Court years, they overturned a lot of laws. And then the Berger Court, under Chief Justice Warren Berger, they were more conservative, and they would exercise judicial restraint. They would avoid overturning laws and to leave policy the way it is, and kind of leave it up to the executive and legislative branch. So each throughout the years, each branch each Supreme Court has its own identity. So how can citizens really influence the Supreme Court? Well, even though citizens don't directly elect Supreme Court justices. They do elect the presidents that appoint them. So if you don't like what's going on, who they're appointing, then vote for someone else in the presidential election. If you don't like what the current president is, who the current president is appointing, or even selecting different members of Congress that could change the Constitution and therefore change the Supreme Court rulings possibly, because the Supreme Court has to go with what the Constitution says. Or even petitioning in front of the Supreme Court House in Washington, D.C. People do that all the time during landmark court cases.